They elbowed him in the face, then learned why hitting a Navy SEAL was a big mistake. They elbowed him in the face right in front of 30 recruits and 2 senior instructors. Called it an accident. Laughed like boys who'd never been tested. But when you hit a Navy SEAL, you don't just hit a man. You hit years of silence, scars, and everything he's learned to control. The gym smelled like rubber mats and pride. Thick, loud, unearned pride. It was late afternoon, light cutting through the high windows in sharp slants, landing on rows of recruits wrestling through drills they barely understood. Their laughter was the wrong kind, the kind that came from insecurity dressed as strength. Chief Instructor Dolan leaned against the steel beam near the edge of the mat, arms folded, voice booming too loud for the size of the room. "Come on, put some muscle into it," he barked like volume could replace instruction. His kind always thought power came from being heard. That's when Lieutenant Commander Ethan Cross walked in. He wasn't tall in a way that intimidated. He was tall in a way that grounded the air. 38, quiet, steady. A man who had seen enough storms to no longer need thunder. His left hand still carried a faint tremor, a remnant from shrapnel in Afghanistan. Nobody asked about it. Nobody dared. He wore no expression, just that stillness that made loud men uncomfortable. Dolan noticed immediately, his grin tight. "Well, look who decided to join the land of the living," he said. "Heard you were still playing therapist to ghosts." Ethan didn't respond. He just looked at the recruits on the mat. One of them, a young guy named Larsons, was gasping, caught in a chokehold, panic flashing through his eyes. Dolan laughed. "He'll tap when he's ready." Ethan knelt beside them, voice calm. "He's done." The recruit coughed, air flooding back into him as Ethan's tone cut through everything. Not loud, not forceful, just final. Authority without aggression. The room quieted for a moment. Then Dolan clapped his hands, breaking the silence. "You're too soft, Commander. These kids need tough love." Ethan looked at him. Love's not supposed to leave bruises. It wasn't a challenge. Just truth. But truth stings men who hide behind noise. Dolan smirked. "Guess we'll see whose method works better." And from the way his eyes narrowed, everyone knew. A line had just been drawn on that mat. Ethan Cross had never been the man who shouted to be heard. The ocean had taught him silence long before the Navy ever did. He came from a quiet Virginia town, son of a mechanic and a Sunday school teacher, the kind of home where people fix things instead of replacing them. He joined the Navy at 19, after his brother's car wrapped around a light pole 2 blocks from home. Grief had no language, so he went where words didn't matter. Underwater in the dark, where breath and heartbeat became the only prayers that counted. 20 years later, the calm still lived in him. The kind people mistook for coldness now. Standing in front of these recruits in all restless energy and untested ego, he felt something he hadn't in years. The weight of everything wrong with the next generation of soldiers. Loud, reckless, chasing medals before meaning. When Dolan walked toward him after drills, Ethan already knew what was coming. "Tell me something." "Cross," Dolan said, voice dipped in mock courtesy. "You think your calm voice stuff actually builds fighters?" Ethan didn't look up from the logbook he was signing. "I think it builds survivors," Dolan snorted. "Survivors don't win wars. Neither do cowards pretending to be tough." That stopped him cold for half a breath, just enough to make Dolan laugh again. Forced this time, brittle. "Careful, Commander. Wouldn't want the recruits thinking you don't respect the chain of command." Ethan finally met his eyes. Respect isn't a title, Chief, it's a choice. There it was, that flicker. The one that meant this wouldn't end with words. That night, when the gym lights went off, Ethan stayed behind. The air was thick with dust and quiet. He stood in front of the mirror, rolling his jaw, testing the movement where, the scar near his temple still, pulled tight when he clenched. He stared at his reflection, the man who'd buried too many brothers to care about small men's games, and whispered, the line that had kept him alive through every mission, every loss. Control wins what rage destroys. The next morning started like any other. Sweat, shouts, boots pounding against rubber. Ethan ran the recruits through endurance drills while Dolan hung back, pretending to supervise, really just waiting for an audience. When the grappling sessions began, Dolan called across the mat, "Cross, you want to show these boys how it's done? Or you just observing today?" Ethan wiped his forehead with a towel. "They're learning fine. Dolan grinned. Then let's give 'em a show. You and me, Commander. Old school demo. The recruits perked up instantly. Whispers, smirks, phones slipping out just far enough for someone to accidentally record. Ethan could have refused. Should have. But the recruits were watching, and sometimes lessons had to be taught in real time. He nodded once. Light contact. Dolan stepped forward, cracking his neck. Of course, they squared off on the mat, barefoot. Ethan moved slow, deliberate. Dolan came in fast, too fast, swinging a fake jab before trying to sweep. Ethan countered easily, redirected the energy, sent Dolan to the ground with a clean pivot. The room reacted, when a few gasps, a few cheers. Dolan smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. He got up. Lucky move. Ethan said nothing. Reset stance. Round 2 started, harder this time. Dolan lunged, hooked Ethan's leg, twisted. A stumble, then another shift of weight. He tried again, and that's when it happened. Sharp, deliberate, too clean to be random. Dolan's elbow snapped out and caught Ethan straight across the face. The sound was small but brutal. Bone on bone. The gym froze. Ethan staggered half a step back, hand rising to his cheek. Blood ran from the corner of his mouth. Dolan froze for half a second, panic hidden behind bravado. Accident, he said quickly. He moved wrong. The recruit stayed silent. The silence of witnesses who'd just seen something that couldn't be unseen. Ethan looked at him once, steady, unreadable, then turned away. Walked off the mat. No yelling, no threats, just that quiet that made every man in that room wish he had yelled instead. Ethan didn't stop at medical. Didn't report it. That wasn't his way. Paperwork covered bruises but never healed them. He walked to the locker room, the hum of fluorescent lights above him the only sound. The mirror reflected a calm face marked by a swelling cheekbone and a thin line of blood under his lip. He ran cold water, watched red swirl down the drain like old memories. His phone buzzed and a text from his sister, Claire. How's training going? Still thinking about Dad lately. He'd be proud. He stared at it for a long time before typing. All good. Just a long day. He pocketed the phone, exhaled slow. The face in the mirror wasn't angry. It was patient. Too patient. Because patience was his weapon. Always had been. He thought of something his old SEAL mentor, Chief Barnes, had told him in Bud's training, back when he was half broken and ready to quit. Cross men like us don't hit back to prove we're strong. We wait to prove we're right. Outside laughter echoed faintly from the gym. Dolan probably spinning his version already. The one where Ethan was too slow, too old, too fragile. Ethan toweled off, reached for his file folder. Inside was tomorrow's schedule. Reflex control drills. Blindfolded contact training. Every move timed and recorded, no room for manipulation, no hiding behind accidents. And in the roster, under instructor pairings, he saw it, Dolan. Ethan stared at the name for a moment. Then smiled faintly, not the smile of revenge but of certainty, because tomorrow wasn't about payback. It was about exposure. And when truth reveals itself, it doesn't shout. It just stands there waiting, calm as a man who's already survived worse. The next day dawned gray and cold, the kind of morning that carried a stillness before storms. The training field stretched wide under a pale sun, dew clinging to the mats, air thick with anticipation. Recruits gathered early, too early, whispering in low tones, pretending they weren't waiting to see what would happen. Dolan strutted in late, coffee in hand, swagger turned up to drown the unease in the room. His bruise from yesterday's fall was half hidden under stubble. "Morning, ladies," he called. "Let's get moving." Ethan stood at the far end of the mat, clipboard tucked under one arm, jaw still slightly swollen but eyes steady. "Phase 4 drills today," he said simply. "Blindfolded contact reflex. Controlled conditions. No exceptions." That last phrase landed like a quiet warning. The recruits lined up, some nervous, some curious. Dolan laughed. "What's the point of fighting blindfolded?" Ethan met his eyes. "To see what's really driving you." He tossed Dolan a blindfold. The man caught it, twirling it on his finger like a joke. But when he tied it on, the smirk faltered. Just a fraction. The first few recruits went through their drills, clumsy but determined. When it was Dolan's turn, the gym went still. Ethan stepped into the circle opposite him, voice calm. "Ready?" "Born ready," Timer starts, Ethan said. Attack when you hear the sound. A soft click echoed, then silence. Dolan lunged instinctively, but his movements were wide, uncontrolled. Ethan sidestepped, redirected his force, let him stumble forward. Again. The pattern repeated, Dolan growing angrier with each failed strike. Then Ethan whispered, "Breathe." It wasn't a taunt. It was instruction. But to Dolan it sounded like victory denied. He swung wildly and found himself flat on the mat, arm locked. Breath gone. The blindfold came off. Ethan stood over him silent. Hand extended. Dolan took it, hesitated, then saw the recruits' faces and what they'd seen. Power wasn't volume, it was precision wrapped in calm, and Ethan had just rewritten the lesson for everyone watching. No one clapped. No one dared. The silence afterward felt heavier than any applause. Dolan stood adjusting his shoulder, pride cracked wide open. He gave a stiff nod, muttered something about good drill, and stepped aside. Ethan said nothing. He just marked a note on the clipboard and called the next name. But the recruits, they saw everything. The way control had dismantled ego without a single raised voice. The way calm had made chaos look childish. For the first time since training began, discipline had a face they could trust. After the session, one of them, Larson, the same recruit Ethan had saved from choking, approached him. "Sir, yesterday when Ethan stopped him with a look. "It's over, son. Just remember what you saw today." Larson nodded slowly, but his eyes said what his words didn't. "Thank you." Later, in the locker room, Ethan sat on the bench, unwrapping his wrist wraps. Hayes, another instructor who'd watched from the observation deck, walked in quietly. "Hell of a session," he said. Ethan gave a faint smile. "It was just training." Hayes shook his head. "No, it was a correction." He hesitated, then added, "Command's already heard about the incident. Cameras picked up yesterday's accident. They're reviewing it." Ethan paused. "I didn't file a report. You didn't have to." For the first time, Ethan looked away. Not out of guilt, but out of the quiet sadness of a man who knew this wasn't victory. Dolan wasn't his enemy. The real enemy was culture, the kind that taught men to mistake cruelty for toughness. Outside, wind rattled the gym doors. Somewhere, recruits were laughing again. Lighter this time, honest this time, Ethan exhaled slow and deep. There were no cheers, no medals, just the faint sound of discipline finding its voice again in silence. That evening, the base cafeteria was unusually quiet. Forks clinked against metal trays, conversations hushed. Dolan sat 2 tables over, nursing black coffee, the bruise near his collarbone visible even in the dim light. Ethan entered, grabbed a tray, sat alone near the window. The ocean glimmered faintly beyond the fence line, silver under the moonlight. He didn't look at Dolan, didn't need to, but the tension in the room shifted when Dolan finally stood and walked over. "You made me look like a fool out there," Dolan said, voice low but trembling with restrained anger. Ethan looked up slowly. "You did that yourself." Dolan's jaw flexed. "You could have reported me." "I could have," Ethan said. "But I'd rather teach you." "Teach me what?" "How to be soft." Ethan set his fork down. "How to be respected." For a moment, Dolan's eyes darted away, shame flickering through before pride reclaimed it. "You think silence makes you better?" "No," Ethan said softly. "It makes me listen longer than you can talk." Dolan didn't respond. He turned halfway between fury and humiliation. Then something unexpected, a pause. His shoulders dropped just a little. "You know, I used to look up to you," he muttered. "Before you came back different?" Ethan's gaze softened. "Different doesn't mean broken. It means I finally know what matters." Dolan stared at him for a long time, then walked away. No words, no scene, just the sound of boots fading down the hallway. Ethan stayed at the table long after, watching his reflection in the cafeteria window. For the first time in years, the quiet didn't feel like loneliness. It felt like peace earned the hard way. And somewhere deep down, he hoped Dolan found the same someday. Later that night, the base lights dimmed, corridors empty except for the hum of vending machines. Ethan sat on the bench outside the dorms, phone pressed to his ear. Claire's voice came through soft and warm. "You sound tired," she said. "Long day," he admitted. "Still can't sleep after training?" "Still can't stop seeing it," she sighed gently. You always did carry too much. Even when we were kids, he smiled faintly. Someone had to. There was a pause. You ever think about leaving it behind? The Navy, the training, all of it? He looked toward the dark ocean. Sometimes. But it's not about the job anymore. It's about the people who still need to learn what we forgot. That strength isn't how hard you hit, it's how long you stand calm. Claire's voice softened. Dad used to say that. Yeah, Ethan whispered. He was right. They talked a while longer. Memories, laughter, the kind that heals more than words admit. When the call ended, Ethan sat there in silence, the night air cool on his bruised cheek. Somewhere behind him, footsteps approached. Hayes again. Command called, he said. They reviewed the footage. You're cleared. Dolan's being reassigned, a behavioral review. Ethan nodded slowly. No joy, no relief, just quiet acceptance. He'll hate me for it. Maybe, Hayes said. Or maybe he'll thank you one day. Ethan didn't answer. He just looked back at the sea, endless and still, and thought about all the men he'd trained. The ones who made it. The ones who didn't, and the thin line that separated pride from purpose. He stood, straightened his uniform, and walked back toward the gym. Because lessons, real ones, don't end when the audience leaves. They echo. Word spread fast. By morning, the whole training division had seen the footage. No official briefing, no memo. Just whispers passed between recruits like folklore. Did you see it? Dolan swung. He meant it. Cross didn't even hit back. Yeah, but somehow, he still won. Ethan noticed the shift immediately. Recruits greeted him differently now. Straighter posture, clearer eyes. Not fear, respect. The real kind, born from observation, not instruction. He moved through drills like clockwork, voice steady, never mentioning the incident. When Larson hesitated during a sparring exercise, Ethan crouched beside him. Don't rush your breath, he said. Control's the difference between surviving and regretting. The young recruit nodded. Sir, were you ever scared out there? In the field? Ethan smiled faintly. Every time. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's what you do with it. That line hit something deep in the boy, maybe in everyone who overheard it. The gym stayed quieter that day, less shouting, more focus. Outside, the flag snapped in the wind. The base felt different now. Hayes walked beside Ethan later, hands in his pockets. You realize you didn't just teach a drill yesterday, right? You reset the standard. Ethan shook his head. I just reminded them what the standard already was. That night, when he passed by the recruits' barracks, he heard them, not joking or roughhousing, but reciting lines from training, helping each other correct grips and stance. Ethan stopped, unseen in the shadows, listening. He didn't smile. He just stood there, the way his father used to when watching him practice baseball in the yard, silent, proud, but never needing to say so, because real legacy isn't loud. It's what echoes when you're gone. Dolan didn't sleep that night. He sat alone in the locker room, head in his hands, the hum of the air vent the only sound. The mirror in front of him reflected a man he barely recognized. Tired eyes, a bruise that wouldn't fade, and a question he'd spent years avoiding. When did I become the thing I used to hate? He remembered joining the Navy at 21, the kid who believed discipline meant control and control meant safety. Somewhere along the line, that turned into domination. The louder he got, the less he heard himself. He looked up at his reflection and whispered, You swung first. It wasn't confession. It was realization. The door creaked open. Hayes stood there, arms folded, not smug, just human. Command wants a statement tomorrow, he said quietly. They're giving you a chance to explain. Dolan nodded. You think it'll matter? Hayes shrugged. Depends if you're ready to tell the truth. After he left, Dolan stared at the empty room. On the bench sat Ethan's forgotten towel, folded, neat, deliberate. He picked it up, thumb brushing over the initials stitched in one corner. EC. He remembered the look in Ethan's eyes after the elbow. No rage, no threat, just disappointment. That hurt more than any hit ever could. For the first time, Dolan understood what Cross had been teaching. Power wasn't about standing over someone. It was about being able to and choosing not to. He exhaled slowly, like releasing years of something heavy. Tomorrow, he decided, he'd stop pretending to be the man everyone feared, and start trying to be the one they could respect. Sometimes, the hardest mission is coming home to yourself. The next morning, the air in command's briefing room was thick with unease. The walls buzzed with quiet tension, not anger but consequence. Dolan stood before the table, flanked by 2 senior officers. Ethan sat to the side, silent, unreadable. The officer in charge, Commander Phelps, leaned forward. "Chief Dolan, we've reviewed the footage. The elbow wasn't accidental." Dolan nodded once. "No, sir. You understand the gravity of that?" "Yes, sir. I do." Ethan's eyes stayed down, pen motionless over his notes. Phelps continued. "Lieutenant Commander Cross chose not to file a complaint. But that doesn't erase the breach of conduct." Dolan swallowed. "With respect, sir. I know that. And I don't have an excuse." The room stayed quiet for a long moment. Then Dolan turned slightly toward Ethan. "I thought control made me weak. Turns out it's the only reason men like him survive what I couldn't." Ethan looked up, not to gloat, not to confirm, just to acknowledge the rarest kind of courage. Honesty. He gave a small nod. Nothing else needed saying. Phelps cleared his throat. "Effective immediately, Chief Dolan will undergo retraining and psychological evaluation. This record will reflect the incident, but so will his cooperation." Dolan nodded again. "Understood." When the meeting ended, the hallway felt lighter somehow. Dolan caught up to Ethan outside. "Cross," he said quietly. "For what it's worth." "I'm sorry." Ethan met his eyes steady. "Don't say it for me. Say it for the next man you train." Dolan exhaled. "Yeah, I will." They shook hands, no audience, no cameras, just the quiet rhythm of accountability finding its voice. For once, Dolan didn't fill the silence. He just let it be, and for Ethan that was enough. Weeks passed. The bruise faded, the whispers died. Training went back to its rhythm, but something stayed different. Recruits spoke softer. Instructors corrected instead of belittling. The noise that used to fill the gym was replaced by purpose. Ethan's schedule remained the same. Dawn drills, weapon assessments, evening logs. But every day, new faces came to him quietly. "Sir," they'd say, "I've been thinking about what you said." Or, "I tried slowing my breath, it worked." Little things. But little things are how change starts. One night after lights out, Ethan sat alone on the pier behind the base. The sea was calm, black glass under a silver moon. He could still hear his brother's voice sometimes, the one that had pushed him to join all those years ago. "Don't waste your second chance, Ethan." He hadn't. Not this time. Hayes found him there, hands in his pockets. "Dolan's taking retraining seriously," he said. "He's different," Ethan nodded. "We all are. You ever think about leaving?" Ethan smiled faintly. "Every day, but there's still more to teach." The 2 men stood there in silence. Wind rustled the flags above the dock, the ocean whispering like an old friend. Hayes finally said, "You know, Cross, patience doesn't look powerful until it wins." Ethan looked out at the horizon where sea met sky, endless and quiet. "That's the thing about power," he said. "Real power never has to prove itself." He stood, the weight on his shoulders lighter than it had been in years. Some men win wars, others end them without firing a shot. Ethan Cross had done both. Graduation day dawned beneath a pale blue sky. Flags rippled across the parade ground, rows of recruits standing in perfect formation, boots polished, eyes forward. The air smelled of brass polish, sea salt, and pride. Ethan Cross walked the line slowly, inspecting each face. They weren't the same group who'd stumbled through their first week. Their shoulders carried purpose now, not fear, not ego. When he stopped in front of Larson, the young recruit snapped a salute so sharp it could cut air. Ethan returned it with quiet precision. "You earned that uniform, son," he said. "Yes, sir," Larson answered, voice steady. "Because you taught us what it really means." Ethan's throat tightened, but he didn't respond. The commander's voice echoed through the loudspeakers. "Congratulations to the newest graduates of SEAL Division 9. Cheers broke across the field. Families clapped from the bleachers. Camera flashes blinked like fireflies in daylight. Behind the noise, Dolan stood alone near the fence line, still in training uniform, watching. He caught Ethan's gaze, gave a small nod, not for forgiveness but for gratitude. Ethan returned it. Later, when the crowd thinned, Dolan approached quietly. "They're lucky," he said, "to start under someone like you." Ethan looked out over the horizon. "We're all just borrowing time, Dolan. What we do with it, that's the real test." The two men stood in silence as the last recruits marched off the field, sun glinting off their insignias. For the first time in years, Ethan felt peace instead of weight. Sometimes victory isn't about who falls, it's about who rises without needing to strike. A week after graduation, Ethan sat alone in his quarters, a single envelope resting on the table. The handwriting was firm, deliberate, from Chief Dolan. He opened it slowly. Cross, they're sending me to leadership retraining in Quantico. It's not a punishment anymore, it's a chance. You were right. Control isn't weakness. It's strength in its purest form. I used to think I needed to win every fight. Now I know I just needed to stop starting them. If you ever think your silence doesn't matter, remember this letter. Ethan sat back reading the words again, feeling something rare, closure that didn't need applause. He folded the letter neatly and slipped it inside a small wooden box that held his medals, his brother's dog tags, and one photo, a younger Ethan standing beside his first commanding officer, the man who'd once told him, "Patience is the last lesson every soldier learns." Outside, the ocean whispered beyond the base walls. Ethan rose, stepped out onto the balcony and let the wind take his thoughts. He realized the incident, that single reckless elbow, had changed more than a week's training schedule. It had changed the heartbeat of an entire division. No one would make a documentary about it. No headlines. But for the recruits who'd seen it, that day would live forever as the moment they understood what strength really looked like. Quiet, controlled, unbreakable. Months passed. New recruits arrived, unaware of what had happened before them. But the culture remained different, sharper, calmer, stronger. The lesson had seeped into the walls. One evening, a young recruit bumped another during drills. The second turned, fists half raised, until Larson, now an assistant instructor, stepped between them. "Don't," he said simply. "Control yourself. That's how Cross taught us." The younger men froze, then nodded, tension fading. Larson watched them reset formation and smiled faintly. The legacy lived on. Far from the base, Ethan sat on a fishing pier, boots off, sleeves rolled. The sunset burned red across the horizon. Hayes joined him, tossing a pebble into the water. "Still can't believe that all started with an elbow," Hayes said. Ethan smirked. "Yeah, funny how one moment can teach 1,000. They sat there, the tide humming against the wood. Hayes finally asked, "You ever think about what comes next?" Ethan glanced at the fading light. "Whatever it is," he said, "I'll face it the same way I faced him. Calm." The ocean lapped quietly, as if in agreement, because some wars end not with victory parades or medals, but with a man learning to master himself. And that, Ethan Cross believed, was the only battle worth fighting. They elbowed him in the face, but instead of striking back, he taught them something that would outlive every bruise and every rank. That's what happens when patience becomes a weapon. If you were moved by Ethan Cross's story, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more true-to-life stories of courage, integrity, and quiet power. Because sometimes, silence is the loudest victory of all.